Welcome to the Irish NFL Show's Week 4 recap, where we'll go through all the big talking points from Sunday's game in association with our partner QuinnBet. This weekend coming, of course, a big one for fans on this side of the Atlantic, because we'll have the first of the London games coming up in Week 5. And we start with one of those teams taken to the field on Sunday, the New York Jets. They will play the high-flying Minnesota Vikings in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in just a few days' time. But not the greatest of weekends for them, Kieran. They're knocked off by the Broncos in a defensive slugfest, marred by the weather, and also marred, depending on which side of the argument you take, by either the Jets offense struggling to get to grips with Aaron Rodgers' cadence, but oh no, it can't be Aaron Rodgers' fault, or some pretty poor coaching leading to 4 flags for false starts. I think it was 4. What might even have been 5. Either way,
5.
Far too high to be acceptable in a game at this level. The Jets, as you've been saying since the start of the season, Kieran, will have some problems.
Yeah, exactly. For those that wanted to listen, I've been saying it since the spring. It's the same old song for the Jets. You could almost tell there was portents of doom coming with the weather. I mean, it was just a horrible weather day in New Jersey, and that Rodgers' game doesn't lead itself really to poor weather. I mean, he can play in the snow, but you throw rain in there and it just muddies everything up. Just a poor, sloppy performance from everybody. I mean, the thing with the Jets is, and we'll get to the Salah stuff in a second, but again, with Rodgers, all the skill players have just disappeared. Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, and Garrett Wilson, where have they been the last couple of weeks? They started the season pretty hot, did some work in week 1 and 2, but it's been very quiet. And Rodgers, his frustration was growing during the game. I mean, it was 3 and long, 3 and short, and he was going out, run out of bounds, then the punting again. And, everything's off kilter for the Jets right now. And as I predicted, the Jets have been talked up so much, as they are every single year. And now you have a 2-2 record, and now the stuff starts coming out of the locker room. I said the Nathaniel Hackett thing wouldn't work. It's not looking great right now. I said the Salah relationship with Rodgers. I mean, we had that situation a couple of weeks ago when they had the world famous stare down, and it's not getting any better. The respect is non-existent. This is Rodgers' team, despite the fact that Salah's the head coach and Hackett's the offensive coordinator. Everything runs through Rodgers. If he's not happy, he's going to let everybody know, and if he's not feeling it, he's going to let everybody know that he's not feeling it. And there's just dysfunction again with the Jets over the years, and for me, it comes down to coaching. Salah is a great defensive coordinator. Nobody can argue that. He was great with the Niners. Great defensive coach, but time after time, it doesn't translate to head coach. He hasn't earned the respect of Rodgers. Rodgers doesn't see him as somebody that's above him. He doesn't even see him as an equal. And it comes down to coaching. There's a disconnect there. There's been the stuff in the papers and on the radio today about the cadence. Rodgers or Salah saying it's a coaching thing, and then Rodgers saying that it's up to players to be held accountable. Whole bunch of mess. No one's on the same page. It's the Jets 2024. It could be the Jets 2014, 2004. But I mean, a team that really needed a strong start, because they've got a bit of a chunky schedule coming up in October, November. They needed to get off to a good fast start, and it's not happened.
Now, what do you make of the Salah and Rodgers apparent spat? So, for people who haven't maybe been following this or aren't up to speed, so Salah makes some reference to Aaron Rodgers' cadence, which famously is one of the most sophisticated and fast-paced in the league. He's Mr. Free Play for a reason. He gets defenses to step offside time and time again and creates free play opportunities. But that means that his teammates all have to be on the same side, and they have to be able to follow it, and everybody has to be coordinated and have it locked down. Salah appeared to hint at that maybe being an issue, and then backtracked when Rodgers kind of pushed back in his own press conference. Now, to be fair to Aaron Rodgers, he also took accountability for the loss, saying, look, defense holds the other team to 10 points. I've got to win that game every single time, and it starts with me. But the body language is, it's not great. And these things are small when everything's going well, but they're the kind of things that get magnified when you drop a game like they dropped at home to the Denver Broncos. I mean, we saw Bo Nix throw his first touchdown pass in his 4th start. So it's not as if the Broncos are exactly a high-flying offense that should be taking down a team like the Jets at this point in the cycle. They're not right now looking like a playoff team.
No, they're certainly not. And look, Kieran mentioned it. This is Aaron Rodgers' team, and you just feel he's not happy at the moment. Obviously, with Salah, I watched that press conference with Rodgers, and it's week 4, and already that body language is ominous for Jets fans. There's certainly something not right there. You mentioned it, Salah says that, oh, maybe the cadence is too complicated. Maybe we need to dial it back. Rodgers comes back with, well, there was no problem any other week. It's these players need to be held accountable. And it's not a good look for the Jets. And it does play into what Kieran's been saying, that, things will start to slide down. There's obviously frustration as well. I mean, that Broncos defense, whatever you can say about their offense, that Broncos defense did dictate that game. They really put the Jets under pressure. Obviously, the Jets' biggest kind of player is Garrett Wilson, but they put Patrick Surtain on him, and he pretty much took him out of the game. And once Wilson was taken out of the game, they didn't have anyone else that was able to step up and make a difference. And then Rodgers can look across the field at Bo Nix, who had -7 yards at halftime, and I think a maximum 60 yards by the end of the game. And I think it's just frustration coming through that maybe things aren't running the way they want them to run. Things aren't quite right. And again, there is obviously something there with the head coach, which, when your head coach and your star franchise quarterback, who is a larger than life character like Rodgers, aren't clicking, there's probably some sort of coming to a head at some point with that kind of an issue.
Brian, Salah was brought in because he's seen as a great leader. Obviously, he's a defensive coach, did a great job with the 49ers. In fact, Luke is saying in the comments here he'd love Salah to return to the 49ers as defensive coordinator if the opportunity ever happens. And I'm sure he wouldn't be alone in welcoming Salah back. But he's 20 and 35 as a head coach, and we can point to certain reasons for that. But, one of those reasons will be poor choices that he's made. And again, these small things are going to be magnified. Like it's hard to imagine that in week 4 your offense should be going off or false starting 5 times in a single game. It's just not acceptable.
They'd only had one false start before yesterday's games, and obviously yesterday maybe the weather conditions. You're right in terms of this is probably a little thing that's been bubbling away. We saw the reaction, and they put it to bed very quickly after one of the touchdowns in which Breece Hall scored against the Patriots in that Thursday night victory, where they were pump chesting each other. And this is yesterday there was some alternative way around how they would discuss a particular touchdown score, but it looked a bit strange last week. And obviously we've now come into a stage where they're kind of going back at each other back and forth in terms of what's been said in the press conference, not aligned. I thought the most interesting piece in the press conference actually wasn't actually about Aaron Rodgers. He said we had a great week of preparation, and then the weather broke. Is the head coach and as part of their organization not kind of acknowledging what the weather forecast is ahead of games to understand the nature of how the game may play out? You seem totally taken back by the fact that the weather was adverse yesterday. We're going into late September, October. The weather is turning in most places. I'm surprised that was a concern for him. It kind of struck me as that game last year where the Giants played the Jets in similar type of conditions, and neither team could move the ball effectively throughout the course of the game. But obviously the biggest starting point is coming out of the game these press conferences, and it's not just this game. There's a few other press conferences over the weekend which has raised eyebrows. But looking ahead, Brian Flores and the job maybe not so much of the second half yesterday for the Vikings against the Packers, because the Packers scored a lot of unanswered points, but he's done such a stellar job so far for the Vikings, and he's going to go up against Hackett this Sunday in London, and you can only see one winner in terms of who's going to dominate that affair. So like Kieran said, the following week they've got the Bills at home on a Monday Night Football. The big games are coming now. These are the ones that they had to have. Everybody was suggesting they'd be 3-1 going to London. Not the case, and a lot more storylines ahead of us this week.
And we'll come to that Vikings game and their performance against the Packers shortly. But no, I want to talk about Colts and the Steelers. This time last week, we were commiserating with the Irish 49ers faithful after their watch party, unfortunately, had them watching a losing effort from their team. Steelers had a watch party in Croke Park over the weekend, very well attended, a great night had by all accounts. But unfortunately, they didn't get the win. Second time in a row, they went down to the Browns in a tightly fought affair last year. And this time around, it was the Colts that knocked them out of stride. But like that, unbelievable amount of incident in this game. Joe Flacco, Mr. Hold My Beer, comes in for the Colts after Anthony Richardson gets injured. And, I'm sure Kieran will have his own views on this, and I'm interested in his thoughts. But the Colts not doing a good job of keeping Anthony Richardson out of harm's way. Like whatever about hits he's taken behind the line of scrimmage, he cannot be running into trouble like that. He cannot be forcing the extra couple of yards. And you see the result of what happened over the weekend. He takes 2 really bad hits, and guy after missing most of the season last season with injury is now in jeopardy again.
Yeah, I mean, lessons have to be learned. And we've seen similar quarterbacks to Anthony Richardson over the years who have got really, really bad injuries. These quarterbacks that, they like to make things happen. They're mobile as well as being able to throw the ball. And the Colts need to, not only do they need to work with Anthony Richardson himself to talk to him about, not taking hits that he doesn't need to take and getting out when he needs to. I mean, the quarterback is too important to be risking. But they also need to scheme things that isn't going to put this quarterback in trouble. Look, it's football. It can
Do you
happen
feel
with
like
any play. But
there's two sides to this now, as you point out, right? It's a designed run, and you have a dual threat quarterback. Obviously, you're going to use that, particularly against a very strong defensive team like the Steelers. You need to be able to keep them honest, and you need to be able to look at all the weapons at your disposal. But you've also got to make sure that when he's lined up by Minkah Fitzpatrick like that he just gives himself up. He can't be fighting for 2 or 3 extra yards when he's already got the first down and having a tough tackler like that just lining him up for a shot.
absolutely. Look, the quarterback has become more important than ever when it comes to these franchises now. And Richardson has shown that he's still raw, but he has an arm that is unmatched probably from most quarterbacks in the league. And it's important for the Colts to keep him upright and going. So there is a balance to it, because at the end of the day, he is a football player. You do need to make plays, but you do also need to recognize what your quarterback is, understand what happened last season. He had an injury last season, and who he is. He's a player that will take those extra hits to try and get those extra yards. And sometimes the smarter play is to just not take those hits and to live to fight another play. Now we see he's out. I don't know actually what the update may be, but we're going to be looking at this now. Will he play? Won't he play? How bad is it? And even if he's back next week, you feel like unless they address this, it's an issue that could kind of be ongoing. So the Colts just need to work with this quarterback, and they need to make sure that he is there for the long haul, because he is the future quarterback for this team for 10, 15 years if he stays healthy. So that just needs to be taken into account.
Kieran, I'm going to give you another opportunity for a lap of honour here this weekend. Talking Points, obviously brought to you by our partner QuinnBet, but also brought to you by Mr. I Told You So in the corner here, because you were keeping receipts on this one. You said the way Anthony Richardson plays, the way they're letting him run, he's eventually going to hit the deck and he's going to get hurt. And sorry, not in any manner of means to be crowing about it. It's a terrible thing to see a skilled player like that, or any player, go down with injury, particularly one as exciting as Anthony Richardson. And it's a loss to all of us who love football when players like that aren't playing the game. But this was the chronicle of an injury coming. Yeah,
and I don't like to be right about this, but I did say by week 4 or 5 something was going to happen. Richardson was the quarterback with the Gators, and they played Georgia every year. Now, in the 2 years that he played against Georgia, which is to all intents and purposes a minor league NFL team loaded with talent. We've seen what players have come out of Georgia, Jalen Carter, the likes of those players, and he got banged around in those games too. And I've been watching it for years. Talented quarterback, hell of an arm, and it's his arm that really sold, got sold with the NFL scouts. That's what got him a first round pick. But he is not as mobile as he thinks he is. He's not as shifty as Lamar. He can't juke people out of their shoes in a heartbeat. And unfortunately, this has been coming down the track. Now, the Colts are in a difficult position because they're, I don't want to say they're in win now mode, but they're in a very winnable division. We'll get to the Jags later on, and the Texans too, but or the Titans. I'm sorry, but this is especially next week against the Jags. This is a team that could be 3-2, and definitely with designs on the playoffs. They've got to do a better job with Richardson. They've got to understand and coach into him, because he's too. At college you can forgive it because it's a different world. You're not getting NFL money, but he's got to be coached into making better decisions. He can't be throwing his body into situations like that and doing it repeatedly, because he ended up in the same situation last year, and unfortunately, and I don't think it's as bad as it was last year, but still, there's that propensity for a big time injury again, and the Colts have got to do a better job of coaching him better and getting him out of those situations just to save a yard or two. Concerned about Richardson going forward, but again, Flacco comes in like we said, and just play like he never missed a beat. And but the story of this game is going to be Richardson. How long it's going to get him back? The Colts can't hang their hat on Flacco for the rest of the season.
And having dissed Steichen for calling plays to put Richardson in jeopardy, there's also some beautiful elements to his game planning and to how he can scheme guys open. And, credit to Michael Pittman in particular, who just kept finding these pockets of space, kept finding, whether he was getting the ball from Flacco or getting the ball from Richardson, he was making fools out of what we know is an elite defense.
Yeah, and we talked in the last couple of weeks about the Steelers needing to put up more points. They put up a little bit more points, but it still wasn't enough. Despite the fact that Fields is pretty much cemented the starting position at this stage, barring injury. He's the nailed-on starter going forward.
Just give us those 51% of the snaps for that 4th round pick, Noel. That's all we want as Bears fans. Just keep going, Justin.
Absolutely, that's it.
And they keep Taylor going like he did. I mean, he scored the first touchdown of a jam-packed 6 p.m. Slot, and they keep feeding him, and Pittman gets going. A very winnable game next week against the Jags, 3-2, and they're in the money.
Brian, talk to us about the Vikings. We know they're going to be playing the Jets, as we mentioned, in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Sunday, and they just came out so aggressively at Lambeau. A bit of a revenge game for Aaron Jones, who was very much a part of the offensive game plan and did a great job. Packers were 28-7 down at halftime and did their best to pull it back in fairness to them. But the Vikings, probably alongside the next team we're going to talk about, the Commanders, really the story of this season.
Absolutely. We touched on it last night in the instant reaction. As good as Aaron Jones was, I think it kind of solidified where they see Sam Darnold as part of this whole program. There was no, for me going into this game, I thought, I'm not that I'm not selling Sam Darnold. I just feel like there's game management type of quarterback, but he actually isn't. He isn't the game management quarterback, because we've seen since he's gone in there, Kevin O'Connell, the 99-yard touchdown call, dialed the play against the 49ers with Jefferson, and yesterday on the opening drive, touchdown to Addison, another later touchdown to Addison, and then when they did turn over the Packers late in the second quarter, it was they had a good field position. I said, right, okay, they're going to run the ball effectively here, try to use the clock before halftime. No, straight away, straight to Jefferson, touchdown. Sam Darnold right now he's comeback player of the year, really, isn't he? Bearing in mind where he was last year as a backup with the 49ers. But I think there's a bit of a squeak there. I think we saw something different in the second half. I don't know whether you could say they took the foot off the gas, but they still allowed the Packers to put themselves in a situation where they were having to recover an onside kick late in the game to secure the victory. That, for me, that was a little bit off-putting. And as well as delighted as the Vikings fans will be today, if you said to them on yesterday morning, you're going to win the game, it's going to be 31-29, you get out of Lambeau with a victory, I think there'd be some people kind of wishing in the manner that they could have just, not that they would have kept on going at the rate they were going, but they could have walked away with a nice, comfortable victory and focused ahead on London. The only thing that concerned me was that Brian Flores didn't put the hammer down in the second half on this Packers team.
Noel, talk to us about the Commanders and that stunning 42-14 victory over the Cardinals at the weekend. I mean, they're really firing on all cylinders. There was a lot of teams, the Bears included, who are hoping to be the Texans of this year, but right now that title is belonging to Jayden Daniels and the Commanders. He's been excellent, and they're starting to play a bit of defense too. They shut down a Cardinals offense that we know is very dangerous, particularly with that Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. connection, which again was strong over the weekend. But they're playing complementary football right now, and it's working spectacularly for them. No, I think your mic's muted there. We might go again on that one.
It's a shame. I made
False
such
start.
an amazing point there.
First
That's
flag on
unfortunate, but I don't know if I can even repeat that point. It was so good. But yeah, no. Look, when you look at his team, I mean, Daniels really is the story. He's taken to this NFL like a duck to water. He's been fantastic. There's been question marks about, was he big enough or could he translate? But he really has. But a lot of that as well is this Commanders team. We talked about the changes they made, the coaches they brought in. They made a lot of moves. A lot of experienced players came in. And you're looking at it now, and a lot of that is paying off, because this franchise over the last number of years just needed a bit of stability. It just needed a bit of positive press just to kind of get things moving again. And Daniels has come in now, and he's just lighten the world up as quarterback. I mean, I was looking at some of the stats there today, and actually through 4 games, Daniels is the leading quarterback with 82% completions through the first 4 games of the season, which I'm not sure how many people would have been predicting that at the start of the year. Then you talk about complementary football. They have some good players there, even around Daniels in the offense. They've bulked up that offensive line, which has been better than I think a lot of people have expected. Then in terms of the run game, I mean, Brian Robinson has 101 yards yesterday and a touchdown, and that's something that can take a bit of pressure off a rookie quarterback. And then you have players like Terry McLaurin there and Zach Ertz, who are experienced players, again, who can help this young quarterback and give him outlets. And so far, it just all does seem to be coming together. The defense as well, they have some very good players on defense, and it is showing up against the Cardinals team who, have question marks themselves, but they can be dangerous on offense when things do come together. But the Commanders didn't let that happen yesterday. And at the moment, they're looking good. Top of the NFC North. Could they be this year's Texans? It's not beyond the realms of possibility. We are 4 games in, so while you're kind of starting to see who teams are, there's still, that potential for teams maybe to not quite be that yet. So we'll see how they go over the next few weeks. But so far, so good for the Commanders. They've made all the right moves so far that seem to be getting wins.
And that brings us to the end of our first segment of Game 4 or Week 4 recaps on the Irish NFL Show. Let's take a look. All right, we move on to the second segment of our Week 4 recap. And we start with the 4-0 Kansas City Chiefs, Kieran, who rallied from a 10-point deficit to win at SoFi. Just like last season with the Chiefs, things aren't going entirely smoothly, but at the same time, it doesn't seem to matter. They find ways to pull out these wins, and it's business as usual.
And I don't know how it's happening, because every week they're losing another player. It's just a testimony to the strength that they've built up over the last couple of years and the muscle memory. They go down 10-0 to the Chargers early, and you think, oh, maybe this is the time the Chargers is going to run the ball up and down and take advantage of that Rashee Rice injury, who, by the way, we won't see for the rest of the year and maybe a good deal of time after that. But they're losing players left, right, and center. Kelsey's not the player he was last year. But now Kansas City, it's almost like they've gone to a defensive team. Mahomes is not firing on all cylinders like he has been the last couple of years. Anybody that plays fantasy football knows they're not getting the same amount of points as they were last year or the year before. So the offensive production is dropping, but now they're turning into a defensive team. I mean, they're just scrambling. I mean, you saw what they did yesterday against Herbert. They could smell blood. They knew that ankle was a little iffy, and his mobility was, hampered, and they just went all over him. Chris Jones and sacked all over the place. But they're still thriving despite all the adversity. Pacheco's down. They've got a guy, Carson Steele, who every time he's got the ball, he's fumbling it. And they lose Rashee Rice. Everything is going. Any other team in the NFL taking these hits week after week would be, going into decline, even with a star quarterback like Mahomes. But it's, they got the line, they got Butker, they got that defense. And, the Chargers, that was a great chance for the Chargers to make a statement yesterday. But they just, again, it's not the old Chargers. It's not the Chargers, with Herbert throwing it 400 yards and a couple of picks. But they just never got going. I mean, Herbert only had, 16 for 27. He had 179 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 sacks, 1 interception. Which kind of seems like it's the standard line for quarterbacks these days: 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 100 and change. But I mean, how do you explain it? I mean, every time the back's against the wall, they're coming out with a win. They're scraping these wins. I mean, they're now 10 games unbeaten. And I think all those games by a combined total of 61 points. So either they're riding the luck like crazy, or this is what champions do. They just eke out wins, in the style of the Patriots 15, 20 years ago. But I mean, what can you say? They just keep showing up and putting in performances, not electric performances by any means, not offensively charged productions, but little by little, death by 1,000 cuts. They don't allow these teams to get to them, and they find a way to win. I don't know how, but they're still doing it.
Brian, given the injury situation, and we know they lost Hollywood Brown before his Chiefs career even got started. Xavier Worthy obviously has been a great pickup in the draft, but that receiver room now is very light with Rashee Rice gone down. The speculation mounting that the Chiefs will be looking to do some business before the trade deadline, and so they'll be hoping that somebody with a decent receiving talent stalls in their own drive. Although given the mediocrity around the league at the moment, it's hard to see where that's necessarily going to come from. But it does look like they're going to have to do something, because the cupboard is very bare, even by Chiefs standards, and they've produced a masterclass in make do and mend last season. But even by their standards, this is looking tough now.
It is, but who knows? Maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be a player that's on a roster. Maybe they'll find some player that's on the scrap heap. While Kareem Hunt comes back over the last week, gets activated for this game. Ultimately is very involved in that last drive, that game-winning drive, essentially to put the game away. Darius Slayton from the Giants has been, that's on the rumour mill today, suggested as a potential trade partner ahead of the deadline, the trade deadline in a couple of weeks. So that's an interesting one. But yeah, they'll find someone, but ultimately they'll find someone who can just come in kind of like he always do and just fit into the system and acknowledge what's required of them. Situational football is what I always talk about, Connor, isn't it? You know, the Chargers have an opportunity to take a field goal and go up 13-10, because there's no way they're going to give the ball at the 1 yard line to Mahomes and he's going to drive down and score a touchdown. Oh, well, there you go. They found their way again to go down and punch it in, and then, you know, they let the defense go and take care of Herbert, as Kieran was alluded to with the injury. The touchdown to Wardy came at a really good time. It's significant time in the game. Like, they were 10-0 down. They weren't really moving the ball. It needed a bit of Mahomes magic. There was a 52, 55-yard touchdown. Show it to Wardy. Wardy's a game changer. He's exactly what they wanted. And you think back to the draft night and how the Bills, I know Bills have got their own players in, so they'll probably be satisfied. But it's one that got away because they did business with the Chiefs. He comes in. He's a game changer, and that's what they're going to have throughout the course of the season. Where they're struggling, one big player will step up and keep them in the game, and those people will lead to victories. And people are suggesting they won't last. Well, we thought that last year. They're not playing well. They're 4-0. They're in a better position now this year, probably playing lesser football at 4-0. And I think they've beaten the Ravens. They've beaten the Bengals. You know, the one seed is there for them already. It's a huge task for someone to knock these off. It'd be interesting to see who it is inevitably when it comes January in the playoffs.
No, we saw the 49ers, who we talked about at length prior to the season starting as being probably the class of the NFC, but for whom it hasn't gone all their own way. They snapped a 2-game skid, though, over the weekend by beating the Patriots, and they were up 20-0 at one stage before the Patriots started to play, which certainly helps. But it's still not vintage San Francisco play that we're seeing right now. A win is a win, and they'd be very happy with it the way things have gone in recent weeks, but they still got some work to do.
We do. Look, we know they've got a few injuries there themselves, but you would expect them to handle a team like New England, and they did. It was a bit of a sloppy game. Both teams kind of lost. New England lost a couple of fumbles. San Francisco lost one, a couple of interceptions, but the Niners were just too strong. They were able to just go in. Fred Warner obviously looked good. He has a pick six. They were able to go in and beat this New England team, and maybe they never really needed to get out a second gear to go and do that. But as you say, in general, it hasn't looked overly convincing. They've had a couple of defeats where you kind of question what's happening. Is it the hangover? You know, the Super Bowl, losing the Super Bowl the next year, you've got a bit of a hangover. Can you get back there again? They certainly have the talent to do it, but whether or not they will do it, you know, it remains to be seen. But this was still an important win for them, because obviously the Seahawks are 3-0 at the moment. So you could easily find yourself losing touch with them. If they were to get a good result tonight against the Lions, well then, you know, you could find yourself in trouble. So the 49ers needed to get that win. And sort of similar to the Chiefs, who we've just been talking about there, sometimes it's just important to get those wins however you can, and trust that a team stacked with this kind of talent over the course of the season will do enough to get to the playoffs. And then when that kind of talent hits the playoffs, it's all there to be played for. But you do feel like that this 49ers team does need to step it up, because there will be tougher challenges coming over the next few weeks. And, you know, they're a team that would expect to be challenging for that division, and they will need to kind of get their performances back up to do that.
Brian, you had some thoughts on the Patriots.
3 weeks ago, the Patriots beat the Bengals, and everyone was saying it's refreshing to see a new head coach come in, take over from Bill Belichick, and navigate a victory on the road with the Bengals. And this is the new Patriots. And, you know, Jeremy O is a great coach because he was there and he learned from Bill. And then 3 weeks later, it's now the narrative's changed to Asher, isn't this team terrible because this is the team that Bill had and Bill put this team together, and now Mayo has to clean up his mess, and it's going to take a long time for this team to get back on track. It's amazing how the NFL at times can be so fickle. 3 weeks ago, they were celebrating a shock win in Cincinnati, and now this morning, Patriots fans are easing off and saying, "Oh no, there's a lot of work ahead, and it's not entirely on the head coach because he's taken in a lot of players from last year's dead wood, shall we say?" There has to be a balance somewhere. I can't keep just alluding to Bill Belichick and where he left his team last year. And look, the Patriots are in a complete rebuild, and I thought they hung around well enough yesterday, bearing in mind where the 49ers are at. But this is the level they're at. They're punching above their weight when it comes to these type of games.
Kieran, let's talk Falcons Saints, because it was pretty entertaining NFC South clash. When the Falcons brought in Kirk Cousins this season, I don't think they were envisaging that the blueprint for success was going to be defense and special teams, and that they'd be looking to rely on snookers to get out of jail against the Saints without scoring an offensive touchdown. But, and I'm going to pre-warn people, terrible pun coming up, where there's a will, there's a young way.
Yeah, I mean, that was just a weird game. There was turnovers everywhere. Red zone was having a field day. Every time you turn around, it was, Rashid Shaheed getting lit up and the ball flying up in the air, or, turnovers left, right, and center. I'm still not sold on this Atlanta team. I don't think Cousins is a great fit for Atlanta. This was Belichick, on the theme of Belichick, he always talked about the season settling in around, early October. That's when teams have, 4 or 5 games in the season. Everything starts to kind of even out, and all those kind of, flash in the pans the first week or two, those surprise games and surprise results, they start to even out, and they come less and less. Not a huge amount to write home in this. I mean, it's Cousins, it's Derek Carr. Derek Carr is kind of reverting back to where I thought he was going to be. And he had an interception yesterday. He went 28 of 36, a decent game, 230 yards. But that interception looms large in his play. Alvin Kamara, again, he put up a nice little game, but it's two teams who I don't think are going very far. I've never been high in the Saints, never been high in the Falcons. I think they're going to start, as we see October going in. I think they're going to revert to 500 teams. I just don't rate either team right now. Not a great game, nothing to write home about. So just nothing special for me with those two teams. I'm sorry.
With the NFC South, Brian, the Eagles seem to be having serious trouble. They've now dropped 3 straight against NFC South opponents. They've been beaten by the Falcons, they've been beaten by the Saints, and now they dropped one to the Bucs. I mean, at this stage, they wouldn't even take for granted that they'd beat the Panthers, given that the Panthers have enjoyed a bit of a resurgence in recent weeks. It's been probably one of the worst division matchups that they could have imagined, and certainly not where they would have thought they'd been at the start of the season.
Yeah, I was very keen on the Bucs going into this one, in particular around the fact that they were missing so many players. Their playmakers are out in Smith and Brown. Lane Johnson, who was such a great cog in the wheel, touched on it last night on the instant reaction with Noel around Vita Vea coming back and how he can dominate a line on its own. We did a show on Captain America's a couple of years ago, Conor, before your time, and the good crowd and a lot of Cowboys fans in, and they asked the question around, when's Mike McCarthy getting sacked? And my response was, when Kellen Moore getting sacked, because he can't seem to manage an offense properly. But yeah, he's the biggest guru of offensive coordinators in the league. The Eagles haven't scored in the first quarter this season, Conor. The total offense yesterday in the middle of the second quarter was 255-0. That's how many yards. That's how well his offense was doing yesterday. They've been outscored 33-14 in the first half of every game this season. For me, there's a lot of problems there, and Sirianni's obviously the one on the hot seat. But like Fangio was brought in to resolve this defense, which really hasn't materialized so far, maybe with the exception of last week's game. But as Kieran rightly said, Derek Carr had one of his games last week, and the Saints probably still should have won that game. I think there's a lot of problems, and where he's shielding it. The offensive coordinator is a bad selection for me. Vic Fangio, I think his time has come and gone as well. Dolphins moved off him quite quickly after 1 year. And I don't think the Eagles are going to win this division. I still think the Cowboys are going to find a way to win the division despite how poorly they're playing.
To be fair to Moore, though, Brian, AJ Brown is a massive part of that offense. That, his addition was what brought Jalen Hurts to life. That big-bodied receiver that go-to target when you really need it. All the top quarterbacks have one. Mahomes has Kelsey. Even Mahomes needs that comfort blanket. When he's gone, they look very, very different offensively. And even the addition of Saquon Barkley can't compensate for that. He, to me, is the most important player in that offense, the most important skill player.
AJ Brown's the most important player. Yeah. Well, I would say you're probably right to a certain extent, but this season, in particular, the week 1 game, they've kind of moved to a Saquon Barkley orientated offense we saw last week. You could argue it's because obviously they're missing certain players, but Barkley was the one yesterday that was the great spark of life in terms of he had some big plays to get them back into the game. And even when they did get back into the game, then the Bucs just put the hammer down again and went at them. Yeah, maybe I'm doing it to service because they're missing players, but Kellen Moore got run out of LA after 1 year. Harbaugh didn't see the need to keep him on. That for me was telling as well. Look, I just think there's a grant like Sirianni's on the hot seat, and ultimately he probably will pay the price. But I think there's bigger problems underneath that, and we're not really seeing the true reflection of what's going on. They just don't seem right this season whatsoever. Scrambled to a win last week, and there's bigger games ahead. I'm not convinced by them right now.
So I'll put you on the spot then on that point, Kieran. Who do you think is going to end up with the first P45 of the season? Because the sweepstakes are heating up now between Sirianni, Peterson's probably a candidate in there. There's a couple of others too already.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's talking Sirianni, but where I am right now, it is all Doug Peterson. And I mean, we can get into the Jags a little bit later, but that's a terrible spot that he's in. A lot of sound bites from press conferences between last night and today. Players, he's thrown the players under the bus. I got Peterson going because now you got the Colts next week. Now there's a very real chance of going 0-5, and then they got the 2 London games, and they've got to get a win from one of those. But even if they do, I mean, the season's over. Nobody's making the playoffs or any kind of run with 0-4. So my pick is old Doug.
All right, that brings us to the end of our second segment of recap points on week 4 Irish NFL show, Monday Night Talking Points. And thanks again to everybody watching us live on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitch, and on X, or indeed if you're listening back to us on the podcast. Please do remember to like and subscribe on whichever platform you're picking us up on. It makes it much easier for others to find us and helps to grow the Irish NFL show community. Well, let's look to some of the other talking points from the weekend now. Brian, the Raiders edged out the Browns. Much better game from Deshaun Watson for Cleveland, but it's very, very tough for the Browns at the moment. And you know the Raiders will have been welcoming this one after their own wobble last week, but it's not getting better at the pace it needs to get better at for Deshaun Watson, or indeed for his coach. While we're talking about people who are on the hot seat.
Yeah, I read a stat today, which I was taken back by, which is the Browns have scored on every single offensive drive they've had opening the game, but yet thereafter they can't seem to do anything to move the ball whatsoever. And they started off well yesterday. It looked okay. This game was there for them. Then there was the offensive line came back to bite them again. There was some costly flags. They had a huge touchdown to Amari Cooper, which was at a stage where it looked like the momentum was changing in the game, and it was called back because an offensive line, a hold. And the offensive line has been ravaged by injuries. He had a backup center in yesterday. He couldn't deal with Watkins, and like it was just one of those. It was a difficult day for them. And the Browns were out of the game in the 4th quarter, and then they happened to stumble across a ball that was slipped by Zamir White, and then they ran it back for a pick 6, and then all of a sudden the momentum of the game changed. But even at the end, when they were driving down and looked potentially like they could win the game, and never going to get the sense that they were going to find a way. For the Raiders, like they're back to 2-2. This is a Raiders team that is a topsy-turvy. They went to Denver on Sunday. You genuinely don't know what Raiders you're going to get. You could get a Raiders that will go out and completely dominate, or it could be a big letdown game for them. They got over the line yesterday. I know someone that was at the game, enjoyed the experience. Raiders fans are fantastic, but he wasn't blown away by the magnitude of their performance.
You wouldn't tend to be blown away by the Raiders these days, no, but winning that one with Max Crosby and Devontae Adams missing it because of various injuries, that's one that they'll have felt that they got against the head. Depending on what way the season goes from here, they look back on one that definitely was 1-1 against the head.
No, absolutely. Look, it is a big win for them, because when you look at the division, obviously we talk about the Chiefs, who are miles ahead of everyone else, but the other 3 teams are all 2-2, so it's all there to be played for. I mean, Brian talked about a couple of things that happened in that game. Obviously, the disallowed touchdown, and then the backup center who comes in and snaps the ball when Watson's not looking. These little things kind of go your way, but you take that as a team. A win is a win. A few weeks from now, nobody will remember the mistakes that could have kind of gone against them. They just remember that the Raiders got a win without two really, really key players. Gardner Minshew is in there. Look, he's doing fine. When he doesn't turn the ball over, as long as he just kind of keeps it steady and manages it. And then when someone like Devontae Adams comes back, obviously, and Max Crosby will come back, and you'll be able to put more pressure on teams. But it's just important that you get those wins, especially early in the season, to kind of keep pace with the other teams in your division. And because we look at those other teams, the Chargers, they could have good days and bad days. The Broncos, well, defense looks good. Offense, we don't know where that's going. So there's a good chance for the Raiders in this division to get that second place. And then who knows from there. But a big win for them, and we'll see where they kind of go from here.
Kieran, I'll tell you who had a big win over the weekend was the Bengals. I was just looking it up there. Since the AFL-NFL merger, of the 155 teams who started the season 0-4, only one team has ever gone on to make the playoffs. That was the Chargers in 1992. That is not a record that the Bengals were going to be aiming to turn around. 1-3, they're still in jeopardy, but they could not afford to lose that game against the Panthers. Probably not quite as comfortable as they would have liked, but they got the job done.
Yeah, and talk about games that they had to have. I mean, there was no option for the Bengals yesterday, and it looked. I mean, it wasn't a back and forth game, but that was a fun game. A lot more offense than some of the other ones. I mean, Burrow had a decent game, 22 for 31, 232, a couple of TDs, and Dalton. Dalton's rejuvenated this team. I mean, we talked a couple of weeks ago about there being no skill players in Carolina worth talking about. All of a sudden, Dalton comes in. You're seeing Chuba Hubbard go for a couple of touchdowns. You're seeing Deontay Johnson, and you're seeing Xavier Legette get a touchdown. So. Again, we don't have to belabor the Bryce Young point, but Dalton's gone in there and he's changed things around. But back to the Bengals, I don't think at this stage, and they were one of my picks to go very far. And who knows, maybe they go on a tear and they do some work in the AFC North. But I mean, that was a much needed win for the Bengals. There's something still not clicking with Burrow. I don't know if he's still got that lingering issue with his hand. Just doesn't seem like he's got the same swagger that I thought he was going to bring into the season. Yes, he had a good game and he brought them through, but there's still underlying issues there. I mean, the one thing I will say is that Jamar Chase coming back with that long touchdown run, that was a huge thing for the Bengals yesterday, and that sparked them. You could see that was one of those moments in the season to look back and say, hey, maybe that was the catalyst. But you could see how Burrow and Chase were vibing after that. But there still seems to be something a little bit off with Burrow, and I think that's a byproduct of how their season has gone so far. I mean, 0-4 would be absolutely catastrophic for them. Do they still have a chance to make the playoffs? Very slim, but there's still that chance. They just have to put a run together, and they've got to make sure that they eliminate all the issues that they're going on right now, the T. Higgins stuff, the Jamar Chase contract stuff. That's got to go away. It really has. They've got to just focus on football right now. They got a huge October ahead of them, but like I said, that was a must win out of any of the teams other than the Raiders. That was a must win this week.
Brian, you've been calling it for the last couple of weeks, saying it was disturbing from a Bengals point of view how hard they found it to run the ball. First game where they run the ball well, they win the game.
Yeah, and Brown has been a nice little addition. He's played a little bit last year, and 2 touchdowns yesterday, a 100-yard game. Everybody was assuming that Zach Moss would take on the responsibility, having come over from the coast this year, but he seems to be the leading light. But yeah, this is to the point we're making. Kind of, you need balanced football. People probably will not read too much into it yesterday because of the nature of their opponent. But this is what they need. They're playing the Ravens this weekend. It's a big clash. If they were to get over the line in that game and they were 2-3, well, then the Ravens will be 2-3, having taken care of the Bills on Sunday Night Football. We might get to that game towards the end. It's a huge game, but it's now put this game in a very different place this weekend. The Ravens have come back with 2 victories. The Bengals have got that victory. They really need to win this clash the weekend. But certainly a balanced offense yesterday, much better, high-scoring game for them in terms of offensively. Still concerned about the defense. You allow Andy Dalton and the Panthers, offense to go up and down the field for large parts. That's for me is still a concern. We haven't seen the Bengals under that defensive coordinator. It was only 2 years removed from being suggested as one of the leading lights for a head coaching role, and maybe even it'll come around again this offseason. But Kieran's alluding to it. It's just not. Doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem right defensively for me right now.
Noel, talk to us about the Bears, because even up their record, gone to 2-2 now after beating the Rams over the weekend, winning one again against the spread and against expectations. They were underdogs on that one. a decent performance from Caleb Williams at quarterback, but again, that Bears defense continues to be the strength of the team, and they, like the Bengals, also ran the ball a lot better, which was something they did really well last year, and something they're going to have to continue to do well if they're going to hope to keep Caleb Williams safe and get him to develop in the way that they hope he will.
Absolutely. Just starting about the defense there first. I mean, because for the first 29 minutes of this game, the offense had been, as it has been in the first couple of games, it didn't look good. It wasn't trending the right way. The offensive line, there was a lot of penalties, and it was very frustrating for those first kind of 29 minutes. But the defense did what they always do, and they kept them in it. Montez Sweat was a beast. Jaquan Brisker had an excellent game. Javon Dexter is showing that he is getting better and better, and he is really a very good young player. And I thought Jalen Johnson had a really good game with some really big hits when you needed them. But then in the last 52 seconds of the first half, the Bears put a drive together. Now, they didn't get 6. They ended up with a field goal. But that seemed to be the catalyst for the second half for this Bears team to really start moving on offense. In fairness to Shane Waldron, he's had his detractors this year. I've questioned a lot of plays. He seemed to get it a lot more in the second half of this game. There was a lot more to his schemes and to his play calls that is what we kind of expected from the start. Again, maybe he just is needing time to bed in.
I don't know if you heard, Noel, sorry to cut across you, but I don't know if you heard Jordan Rodrigue, the senior writer from The Athletic, was on one of the Chicago podcasts. She was on the Under Center podcast actually last week, and she had a couple of really interesting points on Waldron, who she's watched very closely in the NFC West over the past couple of seasons. And one of the things she was saying is, like, the bedrock of Waldron's game has been 12 and 13 personnel, where you're deploying, extra tight ends, where you got a lot of big bodies, and where they do very different things to what you've seen the Bears do in recent weeks. She was saying that because you got Rome Odunze and because you got Keenan Allen, because you got DJ Moore, the temptation and the pressure was to play with 3 wide receivers all the time, which doesn't necessarily allow you to do the kind of things that you would have seen a Sean McVay offense do and that Waldron would have learned under, where you got a lot of really different types of blocking going on and different types of plays and plays that really help against teams that are built to stop the pass, where you're giving them weird looks and you're doing things that they don't expect. And it also allows you to do very different things in the running game, and which the Bears have really struggled with. But as you say, it does seem like he's finding his groove a little bit more.
It does, and he has those weapons there to use. I mean, your point to, maybe he has a bit of a different setup here than he would do in Seattle. I mean, that's something that should have been talked about in the offseason. That's something he should have expected coming in, and he should have had a game plan for that. You can't really feel your way through that. You need to know that this is what you are going to have to work with. But look, it is early days, and maybe he is feeling his way in. There were a couple of questions last week about, whether he was the right guy or not. But this second half, I mean, DeAndre Swift, they finally got him going at 93 yards and a touchdown on the ground and 72 yards in the air. So that's the kind of running back the Bears thought you were bringing in. This running back who can take the ball on the ground and who can be involved in the passing game as well. So that was good to see. But you mentioned Caleb Williams. I mean, I think week on week this player has just got better and better. It hasn't been amazing, it hasn't been perfect, but he's a rookie, and he's a rookie who has had an offensive line in front of him that's been really, really bad, which doesn't help him. But this weekend, he had a lovely pass to DJ Moore, and everything else he just did right. I thought this weekend, more than most weekends, he's been taking those underneath and shorter passes that were there for him, rather than maybe trying to force it a bit more, which maybe is a good sign that, he's just really kind of getting into the game. Maybe he's getting a bit more used to the pace of it. But all in all, I think in the second half, I think the Bears defense does what they always do, and the offense looked a little bit better. Now, the big question is that just a half of football, or is that something that's trending for maybe next week and the week after? And that's what we're going to have to see. But for me, the second half was finally something to smile about, because, as I said, the first half was trending badly for 29 minutes and 52 seconds or 8 seconds.
Brian, where did the Rams go from here? It's been a slightly frustrating season so far, marred by more injuries than most other teams are dealing with, and more critical injuries on their side. Obviously, they're still struggling to cope with the loss of Aaron Donald as well, and that's clear from the defensive standpoint. But they'll be very disappointed with dropping that one, considering the fight back they were able to mount against a very talented 49ers team last week.
Yeah, I thought this was one they would find a way to navigate a victory. It was for me, it was one of the most difficult games to select over the weekend. I thought in the first half, and those alluded to, like the Bears defense held their own and held them in the game. The Rams will look back on the opportunities they had in the first half, being reluctantly accepting field goals and then having to miss a field goal as well, which doesn't help with a rookie kicker. But it was one in the manner where they're at, having beaten the 49ers last week, that they needed to get to certain teams they're going to play this season, with all due respect to the Bears and other teams around the league, that the Rams will feel if they want to be challenging to make the playoffs. These are the games they have to have. Now they put themselves in a precarious situation, 1-3, more difficult games to come. And I think ultimately, Conor, you touched on it there, the injuries are just, you can overcome them for 1 or 2 games. You can have those great comebacks like against the 49ers, the challenge of McVay wanting to beat Shanahan yet again, and other various games within the division, like when they come up against the Seahawks. But ultimately, you can't lose players at that magnitude that they're losing and expect the team to continue on the front foot. It's just not going to happen. And ultimately, that's for me right now is where they're at. They're a great side in their own right, but without these players playing, it's a very difficult ask. And yesterday, they could have just brought it all home. They do well, but they can't get it up. They didn't get it over the line.
Kieran, let's finally talk about the Jags. You mentioned them earlier as Doug Peterson's seat becomes increasingly warm. Beaten by the Texans over the weekend. The game that, again, and this seems to have been the pattern for the Jags this season and towards the end of last season, they had their chances. They had a certain measure of control. Defensively, they really stood tall. But that's 9 on the bounce now that Trevor Lawrence has lost. They're 0-4, and it's a long, long way back.
Very, very long, and there's nothing but despair in the Jacksonville metro area right now. Right after the game, I flicked onto local TV at the press conferences, and there's doom and gloom everywhere. A reporter asked Doug if he was thinking about taking over offensive play calling duties that he did when he started, and basically relegating Press Taylor. And the disdain he had for the reporter, he basically, he mumbled something under his breath and walked away. It's horrible. The relationship with the press has taking a dive, and he's getting it from all angles. He's got Shad Khan breathing down his neck. He's got the media breathing down his neck. He doesn't look comfortable in any of the interactions. But you're right. The Jags had a chance to win this game. I mean, they were in a position up 2017, and every chance that they had to win the game, they basically blew. Again, another fumble from Trevor Lawrence, overthrows, underthrows, inaccurate throws. Everyone's talking now, is Trevor the one? Is he the one that should have got all the money? CJ Stroud, should we have gone and got CJ Stroud? Would we rather CJ Stroud? And everyone is saying yes, obviously. So many holes in this Jaguars team. The running game, that was a tough one yesterday. Bigsby basically took on a lot of the heavy work. The O-line, which has been decimated all season, they weren't the problem yesterday. But there's just negativity all around this team. This is a team since 1995. Their overall record is 198 and 272. Now, that's almost 30 years of football. So they've lost 80, 198 they've won and 272 they've lost. I can't do the quick math right now. But that's a team that is directionless right now, rudderless. It's almost like they're back into rebuild mode. 0-4, staring 0-5 in the face against the Colts next week. Now the problem is you have a stadium coming on board in a couple of years. Are you going to have the goodwill of the city or even the fan base to keep this going? Because I'll tell you right now, if they go, there's going to be a poor crowd next week against the Colts, way less than there should be. And then as the season progresses, when they have a negative record, and they got some big games coming up. They got the Vikings coming to town. They got the Texans. They got the Jets coming to town. There's going to be far fewer people in the seats and preferring to watch it at the bar or the restaurant or the beach than even going to the stadium. That's affecting Shad Khan's bottom line, which is going to affect his decision-making. Peterson's out the door already. I mean, there's no coming back from this. Even if they go 1-4, 2-4, 2-5, he's already done. I don't think he's going to last the season. I think he'd be the first coach done. But everything for the Jags was symptomatic with that 4th and 1, that QB draw that the Texans knew was coming. Everyone in the stadium knew was coming. The announcers knew it was coming, and they just couldn't get it over the line. They couldn't make it work. And then you knew with the Texans getting the ball that they were just going to drive down the field and score. And things are real bad in Jacksonville right now. Everybody, the hand-wringing, the complaining about where are we going as an organization. Maybe we should just move the line and forget about it. We're tired of going through this junk every year. It's just, and what's crazy is this is a team that, I saw a lot of them in the preseason. Great vibes, A lot of great positive energy. That they haven't had Evan Ingram the last couple of weeks. He's a huge part of their offense, and between that and Trevor Lawrence and his miscues and his misfiring, it's looking real bad. Not even the defense can hang their head on any plays that yesterday. Just just a real bad day for Jacksonville, and it's going to be a real tough season. And I don't think that Doug is going to see out the rest of it.
Well, maybe they'll be the first team since the '92 Chargers to make the playoffs after starting the season 0-4, because that's probably what they're going to have to do if they're going to save Doug Peterson's job. Brian, you had a couple of points you wanted to make on this game.
Yeah, on the game and on the situation in general, like as bad as I'm a huge fan of Doug Peterson, but the owner coming out at the start of the season and saying this is the best Jaguars team we put together in quite ever. Not even saying in quite some time. He said ever. That just immediately puts the pressure on the head coach. The GM for me, we're talking about Kieran's alluding to fans and maybe the media outlets are suggesting, is Trevor Lawrence the one to be selected right quarterback? Well, they selected Trayvon Walker, and no, Balky doesn't seem to get any scrutiny over the fact that he selected him over Hutchinson. We see how dominant Hutchinson is with the Lions. Is that a miscue? Because it just doesn't seem to come up whatsoever around the fact that he's missed there in the draft. In terms of situational football, Connor, I was talking about it yesterday, 4th down. He's 4-10 on 4th downs this season. Has a terrible record over the last 3 or 4 years with the Jags on 4th down. And yeah, he continuously goes for it on 4th down. He should have taken the field goal. They may have still lost the game. It would have been by 1 point. But in that instance, bearing in mind they need to get this game over the line, I would have put it in my hands on my defense. But the defense hasn't showed it this year. They're 24 third down defense. They're 27
You
4th
hate
down.
coaches to go for it in 4th down. You're the most anti-analytics person I've ever come across. Yeah, you always had it in for Brandon Staley. You're always down on Doug Campbell. And now
I'm
Doug
not
Peterson.
finished yet, Connor. Here we go. They're 24th on 3rd down defense. They're 27th on 4th down defense. They're 28 on red zone defense. Their defense has not shown up this season. And then the last drive, because they were running the ball quite effectively throughout the course of the game. But in the last drive, when you were running the ball quite effectively over the course of the game, he completely got away from it. And when a drive would probably only needed 1 first down to kill the game off, 3:51 on the clock, 1 yard run, it goes incomplete on 2nd down, incomplete on 3rd down to give the ball back to the Jags. 3:08 left in the game. In that instance, having had some big plays in the run game all day long with Bigsby and Travis Etienne, it's probably the best game they've had with their running backs. Can run the ball, keep the clock moving, put yourself in a situation where you're not giving the Texans much time. It was a bizarre game, and like Doug Peterson, yeah, he's getting the questions and he's trying to put it back on the players. Like it's a complete mismatch, and no one's aligned there. Kieran's right. It's probably right now it looks like the most dysfunctioning team and organization within the league, which is hard to believe. Bearing in mind we're only 2 years removed from when they were playing divisional games against the Chiefs.
It doesn't help you when the Panthers and the Commanders are actually starting to play well now, and the spotlight turns to you. That's it as we turn the page on week 4, although we do have 2 games left. I will remind you, we've Dolphins, Titans and Lions, Seahawks at time of recording. That's taking place in a couple of hours' time. Do remember to check out our Monday Night Football preview where we look at both of the games in that double header. Week 5, of course, we got the London games, or London game, as we mentioned at the top of the show. Shane and Brian will be at that one in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium where the Jets take on the Vikings. The bye week off also kicks off in week 5, so we 4 teams off this coming weekend, but it is bye for us for now on the Irish NFL Show. We'll talk to you very soon.